Hi, I'm Sharon Rosse with the Capital City Arts Initiative. We are here at Western Nevada College's Bristlecone Gallery with Robert Morrison's exhibition, A Glimpse Back. Robert has passed, but we are recording thoughts and memories from his former colleagues and students for this video. The show will be up through December 11th, and we hope you enjoy the video.
Hi, I'm Lynn McLellan. I was Robert's longtime partner. We were together 37 years before he passed away. I miss him very much. But I was around for a lot of his shows from 1981 on. I ended up being more involved than sometimes I wish, because Robert was always trying to get things ready at the last minute, but he worked better under pressure. So, and he never really thought that well of himself. I mean, he couldn't promote himself because he was just too shy. He'd get up and lecture and do all that stuff, but inside of him he was very shy. So there's just a huge body of work that I had to go through, and I think this is a wonderful representation of kind of the breadth of what he was doing. Unfortunately, some pieces have been lost, but this is a great show. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jean-Paul Perrotte. I'm Associate Professor of Composition at the University of Nevada, Reno, and that's how I knew Bob, was from at the university, and I got a chance to work with him, and we collaborated on a work that was a sound art piece that was in the John Travis gallery at the university, and it consisted of 12 brass bowls that he had founded and created that were all slightly out of tune with each other. And I remember when he introduced the idea of using these bowls, he saw me in the hallway and said, "Hey, John Paul, why don't you come into my office real quick? I want to have you listen to something." And we walked into his office, and he had these brass bowls on the desk. And he was hitting the little brass bowls, and they were all vibrating at different frequencies, slightly out of tune with each other. So they weren't all uniform tuning. So the waves would kind of move in and out of each other, and they filled the space in his office. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. And he said, "Do you think we could do something?" And I said, "Yeah." So we went ahead and worked on this piece that with 12 brass bowls that were struck randomly in the gallery space. They were struck with small solenoids that just clinged on the edge of the bowl, and all these beautiful frequencies would kind of move in and out of the room as the listener was walking through the space. And one interesting thing that he told me about this work was that he said, "You know, John Paul, a lot of the work that I do that deals with sound has a very nasty, kind of distorted, dirty kind of sound, but he goes, this is the first piece where the sound is kind of pretty." And so that was something that I remember in my interaction with him. It was a wonderful experience. He he had such a really, he did a lot of work with sound over a large span of time before sound art was really kind of a thing. So I think in many sense he's a pioneer as far as that goes. But he's the most humble person to work with. He was just really genuinely interested in kind of what I thought and my reactions to what he did. And I have to say that it was one of the more memorable collaborations that I've done, especially with a man of such historical importance in the area of sound art. So that's all I had to say.
Hello. I'm Trish Andrew, and I have to tell you that Robert Morrison continues to be my muse. I am not the only one influenced by Robert. There are many practicing artists who owe the birth of their inspirations to the Professor Robert Morrison. That was his ultimate gift to the world of creative, exploratory art. As for his own very wonderful and sometimes unappreciated art, his was genius, both in his two-dimensional and three-dimensional works. He strove not only to produce exacting craft in his artworks, but also to attempt to redefine the space they were presented in, whether it be within the borders of flat white paper, the confines of the walls of sterile galleries, or the horizon lines of the outdoors, or the use of one of nature's most powerful forces, sound. Life was his canvas, and he redefined every day of his life. Robert was precise in the careful use of empty space. His art, I believe, was never meant to be fully understood. Leonard Bernstein once said, a work of art does not answer questions, it provokes them. And its essential meaning is in the tension between the contradictory answers. I believe Robert Morrison existed in that space between the answers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sharon Rosse. I was Bob Morrison's student for several years of sculpture classes in the early 1980s and a postgrad class in 2001 for drawing. Bob's critiques were always superb. He expected you to explain and defend your work. He did not accept lame excuses. Nothing like the dog ate my homework made it past. During critiques, he always brought each student's work into the world of broader contemporary art. He set high expectations, and he made you feel like your artwork was worthy. If a critique was a bit rough, a bit negative, he always seemed to give some bit of a nugget of positive encouragement to keep you going for the next critique. I remember the exhausting 24-hour round trip student trips to the Bay Area to see art. He was determined to make sure that students saw what was going on. And sleep be damned, they were tiring trips. I'm taking the liberty of quoting another one of Bob's students because his words say it best. Forgive me for reading it. Xavier Lopez Jr., quote, "You made us feel as though we were making the most important work in the universe, and that faith has stayed with me. You taught us to dream big, and I still do." CCAI started the Nevada Neighbors program of in-person cultural and art talks in 2003. I knew if Bob came to the talk, it would be a great discussion because he always asked very insightful questions of the guest speaker. And when we began CCAI exhibitions in 2004, if Bob came to the receptions, came to the show, I was thrilled with his encouragement and his support. I've shown Bob's work many times over the years, and the consistent hallmarks were his truth to his vision, the superb, outstanding work, and the work was always a bit challenging to the casual viewer, but it was there and we were thrilled to show it. CCAI is grateful to have this opportunity to show a retrospective of his previous work and a glimpse back. The show is in WNC's Bristlecone Gallery through December 11th, and I hope you get a chance to see it. Thank you.
I met Bob as an undergrad, and I ended up taking all the sculpture classes through advanced sculpture. And it was through Bob that I really decided that I wanted to teach. And after I took his advanced sculpture class, I approached him about doing a teaching assistantship. So we devised something, I think, through a special topics class. And doing that teaching assistantship is what firmed up my ideas about teaching. And so I think about Bob, and I think about his curiosity, his intellect, the fact that he just was a really, really good artist. And there's a bit of a kind of like, I think to me, kind of intellectual mystic about him that I always found really interesting. And so I thought, like, with this video, I would just show some stills and a few short clips of some of my students working on 3D projects, art object projects over the last couple weeks. I didn't go into the archives. This is just what's going on, like, immediately. And it seemed most important to me to just share some of these things. This is a letter and a note to Bob. And so, yeah, that's what I've got for you guys today.
In my head, I imagine it with like different instruments, there's like a violin over here, and a piano over here, and they're all playing with, they're all playing the same song with robot,
Yeah.
It's a little bit unsettling.
It's cool. I'm Lesna Morrison, his granddaughter, one of them. Seeing all of this is so incredible. Seeing some of these pieces that I've seen around his house for years, just here being admired by everyone, it's impossible to describe. It's made even more impactful by the fact that I'm going to college in the same place that he taught, in the same department that he taught in. I'm getting a lot of inspiration from this trip. I'm really excited to keep looking.
Hi, my name is Jens Morrison. I am the son of Robert Morrison, and I would spend a lot of time with my father watching him brainstorm on his sculptures and his installation pieces, and it was amazing to watch how the creativity would just start flowing. And I was there quite a few times at the very end, helping to install and sort of being the assistant to get all the final pieces put together, and how much thought and preparation my dad put into those pieces. And each one of them was just perfect. It was always amazing to watch. It's really great to see this show here today and see some of the pieces that I've seen since I was a kid being built, and now can see them being appreciated by another group of people. So I'm really, really appreciative of this show. It's a great show.
Hi, I'm Jeff Erickson, and I'm the Assistant Director of Facilities down here at Western Nevada College now, but I had worked at the UNR for about 20 years before, and I knew Bob Morrison for many, many years, and I've worked with him as a student and as a colleague and as a friend, almost everything. So I first met Bob at the Nevada Museum of Art when I was the chief preparator there. We had a large retrospective show with his work, and I remember that we had booked the show for a certain date, but we told Bob that it needed to arrive much, much earlier because he was known to be a little delayed sometimes. And so anyway, when the work arrived, it was a ton of metal pieces. We assembled beds, we assembled a bunch of the work that you see in this exhibition, mumbles, and it was a great time to work with him, and we set up the sound systems that he was really interested in with that piece, and then I worked with him later. I left the museum, went to UNR to study art, get my MFA degree, but I also started as the preparator over at the sculpture lab. So I worked with him. He was my boss at that time, and he taught me how to pour bronze and run the foundry out there, and we worked together for many, many years. And then eventually I came back here to Western Nevada College, and it's been a fantastic pleasure to see his work again and be able to help with this exhibition.
My name is Russell Dudley. I'm an artist educator and was a friend and colleague of Bob Morrison's for over 25 years. I first met Bob just out of graduate school when my former wife, Joanna Frew, and I moved to Reno. She had accepted a position teaching art history and performance studies at the university, and I was maybe 28 years old. Bob and a number of others about the department and community at the time invited me into their conversations, and with that I found the ideas surrounding embodied place that I continue to work with today. Bob also invited me into his course critiques and studio space, and it was there that I really became aware of his capacity as an educator, his ethical and conceptual commitment to the practice of art making for his students in addition to himself. His ability to receive the thought of young folks as relevant and worth attention and serious critique produced wildly competent students and some really fabulous work. I've always found Bob's work a bit deceptive and gentle, the fields often opening up from the steel forms punctuated, as Sparse might say, with a graceful poke or point. The work moves between somatic understanding and idiosyncratic conceptual integrity, and it reveals if approached with care. Along with Bob's attunement to the fluctuating landscape of conceptual art, the work was in conversation with material, how it inhabits the world and relates or speaks directly to our bodies. In the exhibition essay, Bob is referred to as like calling some of the surfaces sexy, and this rings true to how he consistently approached form, surface, and color to me. I'd like to share a particular event that I believe demonstrates the blending of curiosity with ethical commitment to practice, and that allows a reading or an entrance to Bob's work. This occurred probably in the spring of 1990, just after Bob had received his National Endowment for the Arts grant. There was a panel discussion put on by the Judicial College at UNR concerning Senator Jesse Helms and others' attacks on the arts in general, and the rescinding of the National Endowment for the Arts grants to a number of artists, including Karen Finley, Andres Serrano, among others. One byproduct of this culture war was the NEA's 1990 appropriation forbidding funding of work that the endowment deemed obscene. And this included that all NEA grant recipients sign a form promising compliance with that law, including that they would make no prurient art. Bob spoke from the audience that day before the judges eloquently about his honor in receiving an NEA grant and the crushing compromise it was to have to predict and truncate his future imaginative work. He talked about his interest to scope of practice being far from the current concerns, but made clear that history in no way could predict his future attention, and that to sign this form would be doing severe harm to his ability, the artist's ability, to be creative, to manifest free will, and was the antithesis of the grant's mission to promote the production of creative works. I appreciated the thought that day, but what really resonated for me was what I can only track as a sort of flickering in his soul or person, that while guarded, I always then noticed and treated as the tracing of Bob's particular navigational system, the way he moved in the world, the way he worked. And it was with that commitment to ethical curiosity, if placed in reverse, if you do it yourself, if you place it in reverse, it starts to reveal a way into the work. You get to kind of just see and feel Bob pushing around the kinds of ideas through the surfaces, through the colors, through his attention. It was an honor to know and be friends with Bob, and it's such a pleasure to see some of this work again. I'm really, really happy that this show is up. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Trish Andrew, and Robert Morrison was my sculpture teacher over 40 years ago at the University of Nevada, Reno. And in my very first class with him, I realized his lectures to his students, to us, was the gold. It just was, he wanted to pass a thought on to you. He would get it to you some way or another. And he inspired so many of us to think our own creative way and art. So I'm going to tell you a story, a very infamous story. I've heard it a couple of times throughout my period at UNR as a student. And he was trying to make a point that when you look at someone's artwork, you're looking with all of the information that you carry. And when you see something that looks like a certain shape, that looks like a car shape, you can't help but say that that's a car. And that young artists had to be aware of that whatever designs and shapes that they made in their art, and they'd say, well, this is a pumpkin, but it looks like a damn car, excuse me. And you're not going to get away with it. People are going to walk up and go, that's a car. So you had to be aware of that. And here's his story. When he was very, very young and just learning how to ride his tricycle, he wanted to be a cowboy. Oh my goodness, he wanted to be a cowboy. That was it. He watched all the old westerns on television. And he didn't have cowboy boots. So he would get into his mom's closet and he'd put on high heels. And because they looked kind of like boots on him, he was so little. And he'd get on his tricycle with his dad's hat on. And you'll see a lot of his hats, his dad's hats, his family hats, and his sculptures, his steel sculptures. They're gorgeous. So he'd get his dad's crumply old hat on, his mom's high heel shoes, and he was a cowboy. And he'd get on his tricycle and he'd go tricycling down the street. And the kids would make fun of him. And he goes, I'm a cowboy. And they go, no, you're a girl. You've got high heels on. He says, no, they're boots. I'm a cowboy. And that was his way to get across to his students that you may say when you're painting something or sculpting a sculpture that it is one thing, but you've got to be aware of what people are going to see when they walk up to it. They will make, the definition of the shape that is shown. It's not going to be a pumpkin, it'll be a car. And you have to be aware of that. Anyhow, his lessons were great. And he certainly could get his ideas across to us. And that was it. That was one of his famous stories. Had to put it out there.
Hi, I'm Sharon Rosse, and I'm pretending to be Mick Sheldon. We invited Mick to send some things for Bob's video, and he did, but he sent me long text messages with some pretty funny stories, but I have to read them. So with my apologies, I'm reading them off my phone, and you have to pretend that I'm Mick Sheldon, which I'm not. Okay, introduction. The first times I talked to Bob happened outside of his classroom the first week of fall semester in 1975. I was wandering through the halls of Almighty Art Department when I hear this voice speaking the most intelligent stuff I've ever heard. I sat down in the hallway and just listened. Bob came out after a while. We said, "How are you?" He asked if I wanted to sit in the room. I was there for the rest of his class. Intrigued, amazed, mind expanded. I wound up sitting in his class in his advanced class weekly the rest of the semester. A simple meeting and invitation. Part 1 over. Okay. All right. Number 2. Yes, drink a bunch of whiskey and smoke a bunch of cigarettes. Bob performed a performance piece where he'd sit in a chair and pulled his t-shirt over his head. He had a microphone attached to his navel and read a passage from some poet. He could see through the cloth of his shirt and found that no one in the audience would look at him. I like that one. Low-tech performance. Number 3. Bob and I became friends rather than teacher-student. He was always moving my tools and annoying kid stuff, messing with me. If I was working on a table and saw he'd walk in the door and yell, "Hey!" and he was the teacher, well, I decided to retaliate. He made a very large self-portrait out of plaster that was in the art room at the university. It was partially covered with black liquid plastic. I took a pencil and wrote, in capital letters, B-U-L-L-Y on its forehead. In my favor, he did depict himself like Theodore Roosevelt. Sharon, I thought he would kill me. Honest. It was a light pencil. He later told me that it was funny. But he took out a hammer and knocked off the nose. He said, "Mick, enough." He was angry, but it was the year he was working on that awful sculpture that's in the park in Carson. He worked with Jean-Louis Moulot, the crazy helicopter mechanic who was at Stead Air Force Base. Drove Bob nuts. That the sculpture, the large one, the thing stopped his career in its tracks. He got hives about then. He told me that when people saw him that year, they would see him as a failure. A sabbatical without him going to Denmark. Aside, no. The sculpture was of Adam Curry, and it is in the Legislative Plaza in Carson City. And it is sort of a self-portrait. The stance of the statue is really how Bob stood. Okay, that was number 3. Number 4. I stole corrupted steel beam from Bob once. It was 8 feet long by 16 inches wide by 8 inches deep. It was in a scrap area of the Quonset hut for about a year. In those days, the art department had a bunch of Quonset huts that classes were taught in. I had been fortunate to have watched him first construct the beam out of mid-thickness steel. He welded in interior struts and closed the ends, then spliced it in half. He spent weeks puddling in steel around the open wound. He made this rigid beam twist ever so slightly in a subtle, frail, delicate way. I watched him working on it, fascinated. He moved it outside of the sculpture lab so that he could watch it rust. I gotta say, that ruined it. So I picked it up on end, rotated it onto the back roof of my Volkswagen Bug, and tied it on tightly. I stole it at night and drove it to my home in Woodland, California. I kept it for a year or 2. I thought it was wicked funny while it was in my backyard. 2 garbage men were picking up my rubbish and wondering what was that, quote, big ugly thing that was doing in my yard. What was it doing in my yard? Did I want them to take it to the dump? I sat them down and tried to teach them about real contemporary art. They left happy and were friendly to me afterwards. When I finally told Bob that I had indeed stolen his twisted beam, but I also told him about the garbage man, he was really happy about that. I loaded it back in my Volkswagen and drove it back to Reno. It was on the art department's front lawn for a number of years. I haven't seen it in a very long time. Number 5. I was lucky enough to have had many pickup truck conversations with Bob. 2 guys leaning against a pickup truck talking for about an hour each time. Lucky. He told me about how he bought his butterscotch Porsche. We planned a beard race, talked about the beef and figgy pudding dinner where we would shave afterwards. We had the occasional foot race. He'd win, I'd win. But the best conversation we ever had was in the second floor of the art department. He was lamenting his work time, too busy to make any significant art. I was working 40 hours a week and taking 2 evening classes. I was working on my ridiculous art and making lots of it. I thought he had a blue-collar job, but no. How many hours you work a week? Asks I. Well, I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays, says he. How much do you make a year? Asked I. About 50 grand a year. Shocked. It was at that very moment that I decided to become an art professor. Almost 30 years later, I became a tenured professor. It was Bob that launched me into the rest of my life. I wish he were still here. That's it. Thank you, Mick. I'm sorry to everybody that I'm not Mick Sheldon and I don't have his incredible voice, but there are mixed stories.
Days in Reno when they had little gas stations, not mom and pop, but pop and sons. Bob would go to various gas stations and get their recycled oil. They weren't recycling, they were dumping it in those days. And then he would use the oil to do these little drawings. Well, here, like a Chevron, Bell, Texaco, where he got the very same. And he liked the way I wrote. He liked my writing. And so I would write these things and go down the bottom. And I always called Robert Bobby, and he in turn called me Eddie. So that's why it's signed Edw Martinez Writing. Yeah. And it was from the mid-'70s, I would say, early '70s, mid-'70s. And as I say, there's no date on it. At the time, you want me to tell you how I met Bob?
Yes.
Okay. It was in late August 1968. We were both hired at the university, and we were down in the ceramic. He was in sculpture, I was in ceramic, and we met there. And as new rookies, newcomers, new faculty, we really didn't know the protocol or dress codes. So we were dressed in our preppy clothes, khaki trousers, white shirts, and a tie. And when we saw each other, we just started laughing, because we thought we looked ridiculous. So we took our ties off, and from that date on, I don't think we ever wore a tie in the art department. And I still have the tie somewheres. And the last time I wore it again at his memorial service, and I think I was the only person in the place with a tie on. At the time, Bob was, in that early '68, the artwork he was doing these tall, slender glass pieces, maybe 5 feet tall, about this tall, narrow, in a box, and he would configure or draw in a way on them by using a special masking tape that gray tombstone people did to etch the tombstones. And he would sandblast the glass in these kind of schematic type forms, almost like, I don't know what to say, electronic grids or something. They were abstracted. And he later did some paintings, big paintings, 5 feet or so, that he would do that same configuration. And I just remember the paintings were held to keep clean because of fingerprints and things like which ruined the effect of the thing. Where those glass works are, I don't know. But that was in 68, 70, somewhere. End of story.
Hi, my name is Nora, and I'm one of Robert's granddaughters. I always thought it was super cool growing up, getting to see all of his artwork and like go to his house and see his super cool stuff and go to his galleries because I got to have that. I got to have the grandpa who did all the cool stuff, and I got to see all of the really, really cool art that he would make. I remember whenever I was a kid and I would go on field trips to Carson City, I would see the sculpture that he made, and I was like, my grandpa made that. That's super cool. And after he passed, I thought it was super amazing to get to go and still see his artwork and go to things like this and see him still get honored and remembered in such a significant way. It just means a lot to me, and the fact that we still have all of these things that remind us of him really makes me feel connected. I love art a lot, and I love that I got to grow up in an environment that prioritized that so much. I'm so proud of everything that he's done, and I love getting to see it always. And yeah, I love him very much, and I'm very proud.
I'm Fred Reid, and I worked with Bob at the university from 1968 until I retired in 2013. I was my first years at UNR were in 1965. When Bob came to the university in 1968, I was in ceramics, drawing, Craig Shepherd, real traditional stuff. And when Bob came to the university from UC Davis, Bob was actually the real spear point of a real change in the UNR's art department, contemporary direction. And for that, I love him and thank him till the day I die, you know. I started teaching at night pottery in 1972, 73. And Bob and I taught next to each other. I never took a class from Bob, but I learned so much working next to him, firing kilns for him, sweeping floors for him, doing things that my job required of me. I had a professional teaching position and a classified position, which meant that I was taking care of the ceramic studios and the sculpture studios were actually absolutely next to each other and always have been. And so from 1972 until 2013, Bob and I taught next to each other. And it was a real education for me, and my work grew because of Bob. And to tell you the truth, I don't know how many students that I saw and that we traded back and forth in sculpture and ceramics that didn't really love and appreciate Bob for his incredible intellect, his way of asking the right questions and deserving the right answer, demanding the right honest answer. And it was a real treat for me. And coming back to this this exhibition here brings Bob back to me in a deep way.
How, in the art world, in the greater art world, not just in your personal life, you've shared your personal story, how did it affect the greater world and his students and the people around him? Do you see his work reaching beyond what's here?
Well, Bob's students, because of Bob's real search for meaning in not only his work but in their work, he pushed students in directions that were really very incredible. Without even, he pushed my work without ever saying a word to me. He pushed my work by the questions that he asked his students, that I had his students come back to me and ask, I said earlier that Bob was the real spear of contemporary, the push for contemporary art. The art department that I grew up in was a very traditional, figure-oriented department. When Bob got there in 1968, he brought the UC Davis, Bob Arneson, Wayne Thiebaud, Roland Peterson, Teal Gambruni approach to right to the university, and it really shifted the way that the UNR art department changed its outlook. I didn't really realize how much until much later in my career, but Bob's influence was deep, and the UC Davis was deep. Influence was deep too. The department hired Chris Underser, Bob Arneson, UC Davis graduate, to teach in ceramics. And we worked together until Chris retired. But it was a real contemporary, and it strives to be to this day. Although there's been a generational shift since I retired and Bob, passed away. The department has moved in, and I think in a more contemporary way, and we'll just see where that goes. It's always a treat. Art isn't a duck that you can shoot sitting down, because it doesn't sit. I can hang a duck on the wall, but that's about it. So, yeah.
My name is Tamara Scronce. Professor Robert Morrison is one of the most influential people in my life. He was my mentor, both as a teacher and as an artist. He had an incredible impact, not only on my college education, but on my whole adult life. We all have those teachers in our lives, the ones we reflect on, the ones that feel central to our becoming who we eventually become, the ones we will never, ever forget. And Robert is that for me. I first encountered him in a beginning drawing class at UNR sometime around 1986 or so. Like most everyone in that beginning class, I was young and shy and intimidated and completely clueless about art. But despite his students' collective inexperience, Professor Morrison took that class seriously. Even in our beginning level class, he engaged in thoughtful conversation and rigorous critique, and he challenged us, inviting us again and again to reevaluate the way that we think. Without exaggeration, my world was forever changed by encountering him in that first class. I was so drawn to his teaching that eventually I enrolled in every class he instructed: figure drawing, watercolor, and finally sculpture, where I found my place. I'm not exactly sure what he saw in me, but he believed in my potential to be an artist, and he engaged and encouraged me in ways to believe in myself. His teaching and advising gave me the courage to change my major, to earn a BA degree in art, and after I graduated, he challenged and encouraged me to leave home to pursue graduate study. After I completed my MFA degree, he was instrumental in my coming back home to Reno and UNR, where I was eventually hired as an assistant professor. I had the honor of evolving from being one of his students to being one of his colleagues, co-teaching side by side with him in sculpture. And beyond campus, I can't even begin to express the immeasurable sense of pride I've had showing my artworks alongside his in a number of exhibitions. Robert's artwork is so incredibly smart. It's unpredictable. It's always beautiful. And somehow he managed to be visually minimal while still being conceptually immensely complex. With all our history, clearly he has served as a singular and significant inspiration and influence. I became both an artist and a teacher in his footsteps. Many of us wandered into his classes not knowing what to expect, but he showed us how and why to believe in and care deeply about art and all the unpredictable and elegant ways it communicates ideas. He invited us and gave us permission to be artists, whether for a single semester or for the duration of our lives. And I truly hope that that is the kind of teacher that I've been. It could go without saying, but the world isn't the same without him, and I truly, truly miss him. I had the privilege of having this person actively engaged in my life for decades in multiple roles. I studied with him, I worked with him, and I exhibited with him. No doubt he could at times be difficult and messy. He was a perfectionist and a procrastinator, and he was so very smart and so complex that he almost always made things complicated, brilliantly complicated, in the ways that only Robert could. It truly is a privilege to know him and reflect on him in only the most positive terms. I miss him a lot.
So Sharon, again, I just want to thank everybody for participating in the video. It's listening to the what everybody said. It was evident how many lives Bob touched, and in such profound and positive ways. And he taught for 49 years at UNR in 4 classes a semester with 10 to 30 students a semester over 49 years. There were a lot of people that had the opportunity to learn from him. So to those of you who participated and to those of you watching, thank you so much. He was an amazing teacher, and this has been a wonderful opportunity. This exhibition has truly been a group effort. Big thank yous to Lynn McLellan, Bob's partner, for loaning work to CCAI and the college. She gathered work for us and let us go through the basement and pick pieces, and she was a major support for this exhibition. Thank you to Dr. Brett Van Heusen for writing the superb essay, which is available as a handout in the gallery, so you can come pick it up here when you see the show, and it's also archived on our website. More thank yous to Jeff Erickson, artist, and WNC staff, helping get these large, heavy steel sculptures from Lynn's house and brought them to campus, and then when we were hanging the show, brought them into the gallery for us. Thank you to artist Tamara Scronce, who came down and helped stabilize the big steel sculptures. The exhibition will be up through December 11th. Thank you to Western Nevada College for this excellent gallery space. You can follow CCAI on our website, ccainb.org, on Facebook and Instagram with almost daily posts. Come see all the art in our 4 galleries in Carson City, and each of the galleries have plenty of free parking. You'll find more exhibition videos on our YouTube channel, and CCI's generous funders are listed on the following slide. And we welcome you to become a CCI member. Your memberships help support the honorary that we give to artists and writers. Enjoy the video, and thank you.